Saludos everybody, welcome back to Decentshirt, where we play cards, but we wear decent shirts. And as you can see, I am rocking the classic but never stale Stellar Sluggle. And I am not just accompanied by my Stellar Sluggle shirt, nor my Stellar Sluggle over here, but also with this cute companion over here. This Stellar Sluggle was completely made in crochet by the folks at It's Your Mood. If you guys are interested in more Elestral crochets, by all means, I'm gonna include the description down below so you guys can follow her. Currently, she's selling on eBay a Stellar Scepter, and I gotta tell you, it is absolutely gorgeous. So hopefully you guys find something that you enjoy. And moving on to the other part of the video, which is the review. Yes, today we're going to be doing a review on the newest set of Frostfall. That is correct. Frostfall, for those that don't know, is going to be releasing around May. And to prepare for that, we're going to be reviewing which cards have the most potential in the meta according to my opinion. Obviously, I could be wrong. Most likely I will be wrong, but I'm completely okay with that. Hopefully you guys are also okay with that, and we can talk about it in the comments. So, how are we going to be doing this? Well, I'm not going to be completely discussing every single card in the set because that would take hours. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this be the first out of 5 different videos, each reviewing different parts of the set. So that way we can have a digestible yet still fun way of discussing all of the new cards. And today we're going to start with the most important set. What part of Frostfall should we discuss? Well, maybe the one that is in the first word of the set, Frost. So today we're going to be working and discussing the element of Frost, which is a new element that was introduced into this set. And we're going to see that this element is going to have a bunch of interesting, fun, and very, very powerful strategies to discuss. So, if you guys are interested, I suggest that you stick around, watch the video, and I'll see you at the end of the video. To begin, I'm going to present the different grade stamps we will be using for this video. First, we have the S tier, which is reserved for the best of the best, meaning the card is essential to a current S tier deck or will see play from then on in most meta decks. Our second stamp is the A tier, which depicts cards that will be support to meta contenders and will see a lot of play. If paired with future support, they will probably be elevated to S tier status. At third, we have the B tier stamp, which are cards that will see some play, but not often enough to really see consistent play in meta decks, as more often than not, they'll be a handy one-off. This is also the slot for any card that can and will probably only see used to counter the current meta as techs. Our fourth stamp is the C tier stamp, which is essentially our rogue or fun deck status. These decks can be competitive, but a lot of things usually have to go their way for it to be successful due to its lack of consistency and or exploitable weaknesses to meta decks. Our D tier stamp is named Lost in the Sauce because they feature cards that dream with the potential of being strong strategies while neglecting the fact that they require too many moving pieces for you to consistently pull these off. These convoluted combos are best reserved for casual play or any kind of format that is not super competitive. Lastly, our F stamp, as the title implies, are cards that will probably never see play in tournaments unless they get a huge buff in future sets, and even then, they will probably have a steep mountain to climb. Well, with that out of the way, let's get on to our review of the cards. So we're about to start with our review, and starting with Cryoling. Cryoling is technically one of the first cards that was revealed for Frostfall, and it has a very interesting effect. It says that it gets +1 attack for each Frost Spirit in the Underworld. And this effect seems really nice until you realize that it has the second part of the effect, and this effect says that when it has 6 or more attack, you're automatically forced to either destroy it in your main phase or special ascend into Cryoburn. Now, this isn't the worst effect, but it definitely limits the huge potential that Krylling could have had as a 1-drop that could have, in theory, infinite attack. Right, being completely honest, this probably would have made it a problem. It would probably made it broken, but still, I would have really liked if, at the very least, it had a little bit higher of a cap, maybe 7 or maybe 8. That way you could still have Krylling reach that 6 stat that you would be able to run over other 5 attackers. But alas, this restriction really limits the potential of Krylling in other decks, and it's forced to really be used in its Ascension deck. So we're going to give this Krylling a C for this first card. Now, looking at the next card, we have the middle stage Ascension, which is called Cryoburn. And right from the get-go, we see that it has 7 attack, 4 defense. It's a 2-drop of Frost Spirits. And this isn't the worst, but it isn't anything new or anything special. There's definitely far better 2-drops in the game. So we have to see the effect. And the effect says that during your draw phase, you can discard your hand. And you have to discard your whole hand. You have to at least have 1, so you can't cheat out this effect. And if you do, you're able to special ascend into Cryo Scourge from your deck. Now, this isn't the worst effect. It definitely has potential. However, again, it's a card that is very limited. It is forced to basically work in a Cryo Scourge deck. And none other than that, right? Just work as a Cryo Scourge. And if this card were able to use this effect during the main phase, I think it would be far better. So much better. But the fact that you have to wait until your draw phase, which means that you have to survive not only your own turn and wait for your opponent to react to this casting, but also during your opponent's turn, really handicaps this card. So, again, this card, I think we're going to go even lower than the Cryoling. I think that we're going to be lowering this to a D. I really think that it needs too many pieces, right? You need to defend this card. It has 7 attack, which isn't the worst stat, but you really don't want to attack because you want to make sure that it's protected so you can ascend into Cryo Scourge. And even when you're able to protect it all the way up to your turn, the cost might be a little bit too steep. So for that reason, we're definitely giving this a D. Now, let's look at the next card. And we have here the first boss out of the 2 new structure decks of the second base set. And we have here Cryo Scourge. Cryo Scourge is really solid, if I'm being honest, right? From the get-go, you're seeing the stats. It has 14 attack for 3-drop. That's amazing, right? It's almost as strong as a Pantera, but it really doesn't have to be as strong as a Pantera. It is able to run over most things, including a Volt Tempest, so that's a really solid number to have. We see that it has 5 defense, which is not the worst, not the greatest, but not the worst. It does have a cost of 2 Frost Spirits and 1 Fire Spirit for it to be able to be enchanted. However, that, considering the whole combo, it isn't the worst thing. And we're about to see how this deck really has a lot of synergy with fire decks. Let's see. When you special ascend into this Cryo Scourge, you must destroy all rooms. Okay, right off the get-go, this seems really strong, right? Because you're able to force your opponent to have to activate their cards when you want to. And if we've seen anything out of the first base set, we've seen that Pegas and Equalinks really amass a lot of pressure, and they force your opponent to use cards when they don't want to, but rather when you want to. This has the potential of being a 2-for-1, although in reality it is a 3-drop, so it's a lot more than just a 1-for-2 or 1-for-1. However, right from the get-go, this is a great card because if their opponent cannot react to your casting, then suddenly you're about to destroy their whole back row. And it doesn't go without saying that that is a busted effect. Now, this isn't the only effect that it has. It also has a second effect that says you can expend your spirit deck. Yeah, you heard that right. Expend your spirit deck. And you have to have at least a minimum of one. Again, you can't cheat out this ability or strategy. However, if you do this heavy cost of an effect, your opponent has to expend 5 spirits. So it is basically a burn for 5. And that is absolutely crazy. That is really strong. We've already seen the impact of Krakatuga and eruptions in the metagame as it is. Even though it's a rogue deck, people really do fear for Krakatugas and eruptions because they know that at any point they can just make you lose 6 lives, and usually they have to play around that and try to keep like 7 to 9 lives just to make sure that they steer clear from the eruptions. So that by itself makes Cryoscorch very interesting. It has a lot of potential. It says that it has to be ascended. It has to be special ascended. So you can't ascend it normally, and you can't special cast it like with an altar, not the Altar of Stars, with Rise from the Ashes. However, I'm sure that in the future there will be other ways to special ascend into Cryoscorch, and that really just makes this card have a lot of future potential. And for that reason, I'm going to give this card an A. It does need a couple of pieces. It probably won't be meta, but as a all-round finisher, it has the potential of going for 8. 8 damage in one single turn. That's insane. Not even Pantera gets to do 8. So, really cool card. I'm definitely going to give this an A. Alright, moving on to Catarant. Catarant is one of the cards that I'm most excited for in this set. And the reason for it is not because of his stats. His stats is 3 attack and 1 defense. Well, they're not the worst stats. They're definitely not the best stats either. However, it does have a really strong effect. And an effect that I'm sure is going to see play in practically any Frost deck. It says that when this Catarant receives 1 or more Frost Spirits, you can return up to 2 Frost Spirits from your Underworld to your Spirit deck. So this is basically the new mechanic that was introduced in this set. We were normally used to casting and then healing. However, this is a new type of card that when it receives the spirit, so it also counts as when you cast it, you're also able to heal, and that means that it works with Nexusing. So this card has a lot of potential, and I want to place this card as I'm between the A and the S. I think it's going to be an A. I think it's going to see play in a couple of Frost decks, right? Any Frost deck is probably going to want to abuse Catarant. And it is held down a little bit by his stats. But at the very least, you're able to abuse this effect. And you're going to see that Frost has a lot of ways to move around and to manipulate the Frost Spirits in the graveyard, or not the graveyard, sorry, in the underworld, in the field, and in the hand. So, again, I give this card an A. Moving on to its Ascension, Iwuli. It has 8 attack, which is pretty decent for a 2-drop, and 4 defense, not too shabby. However, it doesn't end there. We do have an effect that says when this Iwuli destroys an opponent's Elestral in battle, you can expend a Frost Spirit in order to destroy each of that opponent's Elestrals. And like many other people that have reviewed this card have already mentioned, it seems good on paper, it seems busted in paper, but in reality, if you're able to get this effect off, which is a big if, you technically are only going to get this effect once, and I don't know if it's going to be worth it, because once you do that effect, yes, you got to destroy your whole opponent's board, which is really strong and really, right, it can decide the match right there, but at the same time, it just becomes like a big 8 attack beast stick. And normally when we want to ascend into other Elestrals, we want to have an effect that is a lot more prominent in the match. So if we ever do have a deck that is able to speed out and throw a bunch of Elestrals, like a new form of Ignectar, then sure, I really would probably be able to have some potential play. But for now, I don't really see it seeing any play, and I'm probably gonna give this card an D. It has potential, but I'm just going to leave it there. I don't think it's going to really see any play in this set. So let's go with Snowaddle. Snowaddle is the other part of the second half of the structure decks that are going to be released in Frostfall, and it has 2 attack and 4 defense. This is a little bit of underwhelming stats, but you're going to see that the main reason to play Snowaddle is not for its stats, it's rather because it's a searcher. It has the effect that when you normal cast this Snowaddle, you can search your deck for an Elestral that it has the enchantment cost of 1 frost and 1 thunder effect, or 1 thunder spirit, and then you add it to their hand. Now this is the first time that we do have a card that lets you search for a Elestral that has dual typing, right? Dual elements. However, the amount of Elestrals that you can really search out with Snowaddle is limited to this set. In the future, it has the potential of being able to search out for a lot more cards, but I fear that we're going to have to wait plenty before we really see Snowaddle really see a lot of play, because again, it has to be 1 frost and 1 thunder. If it was 2 frost, then I think it would see a lot more play. If it was just 1 frost and 1 and 2 frost, that would also see a lot of play. But unfortunately, this card is handicapped by its limitations, and while it has the potential of being really good in the future, for this set, it's really not going to be played unless it is used in its own archetype. So I'm going to give this a D. Moving on to, again, the middle stage of the Ascension line of Penguat and the whole line of the Penguins. This one has 5 attack, a bit of a underwhelming, 7 defense, a little bit better. It has the cost of 1 frost and 1 thunder, and it has the effect that during your draw phase you can disenchant 1 frost and 1 thunder spirit from your field in order to special ascend this Penguat to Imperawat from your hand or deck. So again, very standard effect to ascend into. It's not the worst one to, the worst kind of effect to ascend into the 3rd stage or 2nd stage, but it's not that great either. I think that this card is probably not going to see much play, even in Imperawat decks. You're probably better off just finding other ways of ascending into your Imperawat, because realistically, this card is asking for way too much. Not only do you have to wait until your draw phase, but you also have to disenchant. Yeah, it's anywhere on the field, but you still have to disenchant to then get the Imperawat, which is going to ask to try to get all the spirits that are in play, which we're going to see in a moment. I don't know. I feel like Penguat is very underwhelming and will not see play unless a huge broken ass card is printed out in the 3rd set that really makes Penguat very viable, but I doubt that. So I'm gonna give Penguat, I think I'm gonna give Penguat the first F. Yeah, I think this one is worthy of an F. Alright. And now moving on to Imperawat, which is the second half of the structure decks that I've been referring to. And this is the boss card, right? It's the whole point, is trying to get to this card. And for a 3-drop, its attacks not that great. It's only 11, which put into question how it's going to fare against other 3-drops if that meta were ever to get to that point where we would be trying to summon a lot of 3-drops. However, 9 defense is a lot more respectable. It does need 2 Frost and 1 Thunder Spirit. But the main selling point of this card is most definitely its effect. And its effect says that when you cast this in Perawat, you can nexus all of your enchanting spirits to it. You can disenchant up to 3, well, not up to 3. You have to disenchant 3 in any combination of spirits. And they have to be either Frost or Thunder. You can be 3 Frost, 3 Thunder, 2 Frost, 1 Thunder, like however you prefer, but it has to be any combination of only Frost or Thunder. And if you do, Emperor is able to destroy each card on the opponent's field. And you heard that right. Not just monsters or Elestrals, you're also able to destroy runes. So this card has a lot of crazy upside. The thing is that it needs a lot, because most cases it's a nuke. It's a self-destruct button where you are able to disenchant from him and just nuke your opponent's field. The thing is that you would normally waste your entire casting by trying to cast Emperor, unless you're doing the middle stage strategy, which I don't think many people are going to go for. But otherwise, this effect is just going to be the equivalent of a dark hole in Yu-Gi-Oh, right? You're just going to nuke everything on the field, including yours, and that means that, okay, you got rid of your opponent's field, but you're going to be left wide open in theory for whatever your opponent wants to do, because more often than not, you're going to be wasting a lot of resources to just try to take out, well, not take out, try to summon or cast Emperor. So for Emperor, this is tough. I'm gonna give it a C, right? Any dark hole effect definitely has potential, but I just think it's a little bit too convoluted. Maybe it deserves a D. Now I'm thinking about it. I'm gonna give it a C. I think it has potential in the future, but right now it needs a little bit more. So C, D. I'll give it a D. Yeah, I think it deserves the D. Alright. Now we're on to the Ursas, and this is a fan favorite. This is one of the first couple of cards that were revealed and that we actually got access to playing with in terms of Frostfall cards. And Ursicle has 1 attack and 3 defense. It's a 1 cost Frost Spirit, and it's a searcher. Basically, it says when you normal cast this Ursicle, you can search your deck for an Ursa Elestral or Rune and add it to your hand. And that is really strong because it doesn't just limit it to Elestrals and Ursa Elestrals, but also runes, which means that you can search out your stadium, which is really strong. And while Ursa decks are not the most competitive, they're very fun, and just makes it a little bit more viable. So I definitely like Ursicle. I think that is a card that will see a lot of play in Ursa decks, and for that reason, I'm gonna give it a C. Alright, now moving on to Urscout. Oh, no, not Urscout. Urskoat. Urskoat, guys. Urskoat. Alright, so Urskoat has 2 attack and 3 defense, so it's stats very underwhelming, but it is a 1-drop, and it does say that when this Urskoat is attacked, during the damage step, you can return the attacking Elestral to its owner's hand. And this has a lot of potential, right? It definitely makes it so that your opponent is a little less inclined to attack your Urskoat, or they have to think of what exactly they're going to sacrifice by attacking your Urskoat. If we ever were to get a way to lower the attack while they were in attacking phase, right? While they declare an attack to Urskoat, I think that Urskoat will become a lot better, because it will become a wall that can just basically go 2 for 1, right? You would lower the attack stat of an Elestral in play while they're attacking it, thinking that they can run over the Urskoat, and then they will return back to the hand, and then suddenly they have to go with a second Elestral. So that's where this card would generate a lot of value. Otherwise, Urskoat is pretty decent. I think it deserves a C, just like its companion before, because it has potential. It's going to be part of a rogue deck, and I can potentially see it being part of a Frost toolbox as a way to make your opponent think twice before they attack, right? So definitely a C. Now, definitely the best out of the Ursas, or the new Ursas, well, Ursas in general, I think this is the best card out of the whole package of Ursas. It's Abomin Ursa. I just love it. It's so cute. Anyhow, it has 3 attack and 1 defense, which at first glance might not be looking as the most intimidating card. However, it does have an effect that says that this Abomin Ursa gets +2 attack for each other Elestral Ursa Elestral, for each other Ursa Elestral on your field. So if you're able to cast 2 Ursas in play and one of them having been Abomin Ursa, then suddenly this is going to become a 5 attacker. And this has the crazy upside that if you're able to really defend your Ursas and you're able to stack this board with a bunch of Ursas, then suddenly Abomin Ursa becomes a real threat. For 1 drop, it becomes very scary, especially if you're able to cast 2 Abomin Ursa. Suddenly, right, it really becomes a lot more intimidating. Like I said, I think it's the best out of the Ursas, and this is only going to work in the Ursa decks, unfortunately, so it is limited to the rogue category. So I'm just going to be able to give it a C. Yeah, I can't give it any higher than C. But still, pretty decent card, very fun to play with, and I think that a lot of casual players are definitely going to be using Ursa decks and Abomin Ursa in their decks. Alright, going on to technically their second boss monster, which is Glaciersa. It's a 3-drop for Frost Spirits, and it has 14 attack, but its main selling point is this effect that says that this Glaciersa deals piercing damage. That means that basically if you're able to attack a defense positioned Elestral, you're going to be able to deal damage according to the amount, right, to the additional amount of spirits that you have over the defense positioned Elestral. So that's pretty decent, right? But aside from that, we also have a second effect that is arguably even more important, which is that when this Glaciersa enters battle with an Elestral, you can suppress that Elestral. For those that don't know, suppress is basically the keyword for negating. It basically means that your effects are no longer in effect. They're not even considered, even if you're enchanted. So Glaciersa is really strong for many reasons, right? Not only is it able to negate effects, that effect that you're negating is permanent until you cast another one or you special cast. It's not while Glaciersa is in play. It's the moment that Glaciersa attacks to it, it no longer has an effect. And that is a very underrated part of this attack, or of this card. So I think it definitely has the potential further on to see a lot of play in maybe a ramp Frost deck. But at this moment, I don't know if it's going to see much play. I think it's going to be limited to the Ursas, and even the Ursas think twice before they actually cast the Glaciersa. I think that this is going to be relegated to, I'm going to give it a C. I think it at least deserves a C. It's going to be part of the Ursa deck, which is going to be a fun rogue deck. So definitely a C. Alright, now on to one of my favorite cards from the new set, Tatflow. Tatflow is a 1 attack, 1 defense, Frost Spirit, and Frost Elestral. And we're not here for its stats, spoiler alert, right? It basically says that you can expend 1 Frost Spirit in order to special ascend this Tatflow into an Elestral with an enchantment cost of 1 Frost or 2 Frost. So this is excellent. This is a ramp strategy that is going to allow you to really make the most out of your Frost effects, and it's going to allow you to accumulate many different types of Elestrals that normally wouldn't be able to be played or wouldn't be able to use their strategies in a normal sense, but are going to be able to do so with the Tatflow now. One key thing to look at is that Taflo is able to special cast, well, not special cast, it's able to special ascend not just to 1-drops, but to 2-drops as well. So in theory, that 2-drop is going to have 3 spirits into it. So that is very interesting. I think it's a very underrated part of this card, because it's not just that you're special ascending, it's the fact that you're able to have a spirit with 3 different types of spirits in play. Well, not different, right? 3 spirits in play. And that can be very powerful and very, how do I say, it can be very important for future strategies moving forward, where we rely more on nexuses. So on the sheer potential, I think I'm gonna have to give this a C, because otherwise there's not much. Taflo might go back to B. I think it could go to B. I think that Taflo has a lot of potential. It can work with many of the Frost Spirits and Frost Elestrals that we're going to see later on. I think that Taflo deserves the B. I'm gonna give it a B. Yeah, it's gonna get a B. Alright. Permafrog, the Ascension line of Taflo. It has 1 attack, horrible. For 2 costs, horrible. 3 defense, again, horrible. However, it does have an ability that really makes up for a lot of these bad stats. It says that Elestrals cannot attack unless they are Frost Enchanted or Fire Enchanted. And again, I think that is a pretty decent effect. Unfortunately, I think that Frost is going to become a lot more common for many reasons. And therefore, this effect is not going to be as restrictive or as control heavy as it could potentially be. However, still, if the meta were ever to change to a certain point where it returns to basically the basics that we have in the first set, where Earth Beaters, Thunder Nexus, and Wind are the ones ruling the format, and Frost doesn't really get a huge amount of the pie, then Permafrost, Permafrog could be a really, really strong card that many people might not even have the answers to. So I'm gonna give it a D. I don't think it belongs in any particular rogue deck. I think it has the potential of being a good tech, but the future in which Permafrog becomes a, let's say, a decent tech is way, way farther from us than what I can imagine being in the next couple of months. So I think that Permafrog is going to be staying as a D. Yeah, a D. Alright, let's go to Frostmite. Frostmite is actually very cute. I love this card. I love the art. And Warmite has quickly become one of my favorite cards to play with. I at first really didn't use it, and then I saw its effect and saw that it's limited to the cast, and I was just thinking, this card could be actually really good. So let's look at what Frostmite can do. Frostmite has 3 attack and 1 defense, not the worst stats for at least 1-drop. And it says that you can target an Elestral and give it -5 defense until the end phase. Now this seems like the Astravic counter, essentially. This card basically lowers the defense to the point that it has 0. Most Elestrals don't have more than 5 defense, so this card gives a lot of potential. Now, I'm just thinking that in the future, if we can get this to work with Trifernal, it would be amazing. It's probably not going to happen anytime soon, but I'm waiting for that day where these 2 cards can work in tandem and really screw over some opponents. Well, anyhow, at this point, I don't think it's going to see much play. I think it does have potential because -5 is exactly the amount that it needs to run over Astravic. So it definitely has potential. But since it's defense, not many people play in defense. So we're just going to give it a D for now. And we'll move on to the next card. Alright, so after Frostmite, we have Polarcny. Oh my god. Polarcny. Holoracne. Okay, that's a tongue twister for sure. It's a 2-cost Frost, and it has 2 attack and 5 defense. We're already starting with really underwhelming stats, but let's see its effect. Its effect says that your opponent Elestral gets -2 attack, and you can expend 1 Frost Spirit in order to target and destroy an Elestral with 2 or less attack. Okay, so this one is very interesting. It does have some synergy with the Warmite that I was referring to before, but it's basically asking you to run Frost with Fire, and that means that you're probably running a core similar to the Cryo Scorch. At that point, it's better to just go for that effect. I don't know. It seems a little bit too convoluted to have a 2 cost and a 1 cost for this to really take into effect. But if you're able to get 1 cost that have 4 or less, usually Thunder Elestrals, reach the 4 mark, then this isn't too bad. The only thing is that you have to expend, and it has to be 2 or less. So right now, I'm not really loving this card. I think this is... it has potential, but I think it needs too much for it to work. I'm going to give it a F. Yeah, I think this earned the F tier. I don't know. I feel like it really doesn't work. Okay, on to the star of the show. This is the whole point that Frostfall was working towards, and we have arguably the most important card from the set. We have Morphrost, Lichen form, and this new set basically started with a new mechanic that were titles. I've mentioned them in the past, but essentially they're like, the idea is that you can have multiple copies of a card with the same name, but by adding titles, you're able to have additional copies of that card, extending from the original 3 maximum, by giving it another effect, another stat, and still being able to get the added effects that come with being able to use Elestrals that need a specific card. It's kind of hard to explain. I mean, it's not super hard, but it definitely adds another dimension to this game. We're going to see it specifically with this archetype that is going to have multiple types of Morphrost. So they're all going to be called Morphrost, but each of them has different stats, different abilities, and they all have different titles, which is what allows you to have 3 copies of each of them. So in theory, you can have a whole Elestral deck revolving around Morphrost, which is technically what this deck is trying to go for. So let's read what this deck does. It says that you can expend 1 Frost Spirit and discard this Morphrost in order to search your deck for up to 2 Morphrost that are not Lichen form and add them to your hand. So this is basically like the Amp Up. It's basically Amp Up, but with Morphrost, and it definitely has potential. We're gonna see how this whole deck joins together in a moment, but the idea is that you're able to acquire many Morphrost into hand, and obviously it had the restriction of not being able to search for itself, but the fact that you can search for 2 Morphrosts, and then you're going to see that the other Morphrosts still interact with the Lichen form. So it all becomes like a huge loop that honestly makes this deck really scary, and we're going to see why. Okay, so I'm going to give this... I'm going to give it an A. I think this is going to be a meta deck. I think it's going to see a lot of play. I think it's going to be a good deck, and this is going to be one of the core cards of that set. So I definitely think that it deserves to be in the A tier. Alright, moving on to Morphrost in this form. In this form has an interesting effect, right? It has 2 attack and 1 defense, but what we're really here for is for its effect. Its effect says that when you cast this Morphrost, you can expend 1 Frost Spirit in order to search your deck for up to 2 Morphrost and send them to your underworld. So compared to the first one, which is a Lichen form, that could be activated from the hand, or had to be activated from the hand, This one has to be in the field, right? It's when it's casted. However, it still has a very interesting effect because it is able to send 2 Morphrosts from the deck to the underworld. And you might be thinking, why would I want to do that? I want to add them to the hand. Well, we'll see in a moment why that is a really very important effect for this deck. Normally, you're going to see the Lycan form look for the Indus form and any other form, and then the Indus form is going to search for 2 other forms of Morphrost that are going to be sent to the underworld. That's usually how the combo goes. And it doesn't end there. It has a very strong effect, very scary effect. It has the effect when this Morphrost is destroyed in battle, you can target and destroy a face down rune. So that means that your opponent is not going to be too thrilled of attacking your Indus form. And that means that you're going to be able to either get another value or like more value out of your card, not only because it sets your underworld, but it's also able to get rid of your opponent's cards. Your opponent is likely going to have to choose between 2 things. Either let the Indus form destroy one of their back row if they already have back row that they have to commit to, or they're going to have to choose to not set any back row so that the Indus form doesn't destroy their back row, which in turn means that they're probably not going to have anything to defend themselves, so you are still packing a lot of pressure just with that one effect. So we're already seeing here how the meta is revolving around being able to deal with runes, right? Morphrost Indus form, Equalings, Pigas, Cryoscorch, right? There's many ways that are making your opponent, forcing them to use their runes, and that is what I'm gonna say is probably the most important, or not even important, I would say the most strong, I would say it's the strongest effect that can be put into an Elestral, because it makes your opponent have to react and not play their game. They're playing your game, and they have to act when you want to, not when they want to. So as I've said many times before, this is a really strong effect. In this case, their opponent still has a little bit of more wiggle room because they get to attack it, so they get to choose if they're going to lose their back row. But if they already had back row set and you throw the Morphrost in this form, this is going to put a wrench on their plans, or at least it's going to make it a lot harder for them to execute their defensive plans. So I'm gonna give this an S. Yep, you heard that right. I think this serves to be the first S of the set. I think this card has a lot of potential, and it sets up its tier 1 deck, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Okay, Abominable form. Alright, technically this is the end game. This is what you want to work towards. So Morphrost Abominable form has 1 attack and 3 defense. On a glance, right, it seems like a really bad 1-drop. However, it has a really strong effect that says that this Morphrost gets +1 attack for each Morphrost in your underworld. And now you can see why the Indus form is so important to this deck. It basically is setting the underworld in your favor, right? It's setting a lot of other Morphrost to the underworld, so that way Morphrost Abominable form can get that pluses into their attack stat. And this might not seem super strong, but when you look at the fact that this deck is going to have so many ways to search itself out, be able to send cards to the underworld in 1 to 2 turns, be able to send 4, and if you're not counting that, you're probably going to be discarding the Lycan form, which is going to be 5 Morphrost. Then suddenly you see that this card is going to reach high levels very quickly. 1 to 2 turns is enough. If you don't have like a super explosive turn, 1 to 2 turns is enough for Morphrost to reach 5 to 6 attack, which is already a problem because most decks are trying to steer towards the 5 attack. So, and if later gone, right, this becomes like a snowball effect, quite literally, as the Morphrost is like the snow and the ball. It's a snowball effect where the longer this game takes, the more Morphrost he's probably going to have on the underworld. Which means that every time that he throws another Morphrost, it's probably going to come back stronger than ever. So, very good card. It has a second effect. It says that you can disenchant a Frost Spirit from this Morphrost in order to special cast a Morphrost that is not Abominable form from your underworld. So, in theory, you're able to swarm the field as well. Obviously, you got to be careful with this because you technically want to keep Morphrost in your underworld so it keeps getting its attack buffs. However, this, if the Morphrost Abominable form is able to pack enough pressure and able to run over most of your opponent's Elestrals, if you're about to swing for game, this can be a huge power play. And that's why I think that Morphrost Abominable form deserves a S tier. Yes, you heard that right. Another S tier for the Abominable Morphrost strategy. I think this is going to be indispensable to this deck. I think it's going to be a meta deck. And while I didn't give it to the Lycan form, because the Lycan form is there just to set up the graveyard and or to add cards to the hand to then set up the graveyard. This is the crux of this deck. This is the end game. Now, we have one more Morphrost form. I think this is the weakest out of the 4 Morphrost forms, but I think it's still worth talking about, which is the Terror form. This one is actually going to be a hollow, so it's going to be a little bit harder to pull. However, it has 2 attack and 3 defense. Again, very underwhelming attacks from a glance. However, it has the effect that your opponent's Elestrals gets -1 attack for each Frost Spirit enchanting this Morphrost. So, right, but just by casting the Terraform, you're -1 their attack, which is underwhelming to say the least. But if you're able to Nexus Spirits onto the Morphrost, in theory, you can lower 3, 4, I don't know, even 5 if you're really scary and you're very crazy, right? But if you're able to set up multiple Morphrost Terraforms, then maybe this can have a lot more potential in the future. However, this Morphrost, in my opinion, is going to be used mainly to be discarded. I don't think it's going to be the strongest Morphrost to use. But when you think about the abominable forms of Morphrost that lets you cast another Morphrost from your underworld, let's look at the second effect and see how that effect can also be worked in tandem with this new effect. When a player activates a card effect that targets one or more Morphrosts, you can discard a Morphrost in order to negate the effect and destroy that card. So this is a floodgate. Not the strongest floodgate. It is an Elestral, so it's able you're in theory able to run over it, and it only works when you target it to a Morphrost. However, the fact that you have the option of reviving this from the underworld means that this Morphrost can make your Abominable a little bit harder to kill or harder to get rid of, because if they're planning to get rid of the Abominable with an Earthquake, which is going to cost them 2, alright, you have the Morphrost Terraform, and now if you have a Morphrost in your hand, you can discard it, and your Abominable still is in play, and in fact, you're just feeding more things to it, because not only did you protect it, but since you discarded a Morphrost, that means that you're probably going to get a +1. So, see what I mean? This card, in a vacuum, is not the strongest card. It could probably see play in other decks. However, in the scheme of what the Morphrost strategy is trying to achieve, this card is like the counterproof, right? This is the cherry on top, if you will, to the deck. And I think that this card deserves to be a C. It is part of a meta deck. It is going to be part of Morphrost. However, the card by itself, I think it's a little bit lacking. I think that we're not gonna see. The only reason why we're going to see 3 ups of Morphrost Terraform is due to the fact that you want to have as many Morphrosts in your underworld as possible, and you want to see them. But if it were for the card alone probably wouldn't see play. So that's why I'm gonna give it a C and not a B or higher. So let's move on to the next one. Okay, Frigicub, sorry. Frigicub is the Nexus Elestral for this set, at least for Frost Spirits. And it has 4 attack, which is already starting off great. A lot better than the Kinleo. So 4 attack and 2 defense. That's fine. It's a 1 cost Frost Spirit. And it has the effect that you can Nexus up to 2 Frost Spirits. And when you do, you can enchant a Frost Spirit from your underworld to Frigicub. Now this is great. This is a really strong card. On the surface, it might not seem anything great, but it's sort of like a pseudo revival or healer, because you're technically returning a Frost Spirit from your underworld to the field, right? You're enchanting it to discard, but also if it's used in tandem with other cards, or if you use it, for example, to be able to play counter runes, then the cost of counter runes can become a lot cheaper with this kind of effect. So 4 attack is pretty decent, and the fact that you are able to enchant it and basically heal is a great card, especially because we already talked about Catarant that loves to receive Frost Spirit. So in theory, you can like do a super interesting combo where you have Catarant and Frigicub in play, and you Nexus so that Catarant receives a Frost Spirit, which would then mean that you would be able to heal 2 Frost Spirits back to your Spirit deck. But at the same time, you're able to choose one of your Frost Spirits in your underworld and basically enchant them to the Frigicub, so you have another Spirit to then move around or to use it for counter runes or any sort of play that you want to do in the future. So really strong card, and we haven't even talked about the potential power play that this could go with the stadium, right? Every element has their stadium, and the stadium for the most part says that you get +1 attack for each Frost Spirit attached or enchanted into each Elestral. So that means that Frigicub, if it has 2, suddenly it's a 6 attack. And again, that makes it a lot more threatening. And not just because of the effect and all the healing, but also because it is a viable attacker. So I think Frigicub deserves an A. I go back and forth between B and A, but the fact that it's the Nexus of the Frost Spirits means that any Frost deck is probably going to be using Frigicub, because they're probably going to want to abuse the fact that you can return spirits from your underworld to play, so you can have added value to Frigicub. So I definitely believe that it deserves an A. Now let's look at the Ascension Shivaroar, another holo from this set. It has 7 attack and 5 defense, which is pretty decent for a 2-dropper. Usually a 7-drop doesn't get to have a lot of high defense, but it has 5 defense, which is very solid for a card like this. It has 2 Frost Spirit conditions, right? Or like costs. And it has the following effect. You can enchant from your underworld a Frost Spirit. Okay, right off the gate, we're seeing the synergy between the Frigicub with the Shivaroar, and both of them wanting to be able to return Frost Spirits from their underworld. That is excellent. Now, let's see what the second part of the effect says. While Mountains of Boreas is enchanted, so we were talking about the stadium back then now, and it seems that this card is going to be working in tandem with a Shivaroar and the stadium. So while Mountains of Boreas is enchanted, this Shivaroar cannot be targeted by opponents' root effects. Okay, so right off the get-go, this is essentially the new Sonic Core. It's basically immune to your opponent's runes. That means no Earthquake. That means no resting on your laurels. That means no well, Shield of Achilles does not target, but no Altar of Stars, no Zeus. That is really, really strong, especially because if you're already playing the Mountain of Warriors, which you must have in place so that Chivalry can have its immunity active, it also means that Chivalry in theory is going to have 9 attack at the very least, and that is scary. So definitely a strong card. I think this card deserves an, I'm going to give it an A. Okay, maybe an A is too much. I think it's going to be a B. I think it's going to be a solid deck card. I think it's going to be really cool and going to be an interesting tech in some Frost decks. Some might try to main deck it, but I think some people are just going to prefer to go with a side deck option. Maybe 2 Chivalry, 2 Mountain of Warriors. So that way you have the option of catching your opponent off guard and maybe they're not ready for the Chivalry. So I think that it deserves to be a B. Truthfully, I think it's a lot stronger than a B card, but at least in the format that we are right now, I think I can't put it higher than a B because it's not going to be necessarily a meta deck, or at least I'm not expecting it to be. Maybe it will be, and then I'll be proven wrong. Alright, moving on to the final batch of Frost Spirits that we have for this set. We have Arcturus. Arcturus basically has 3 attack and 2 defense, which again, we're seeing a trend here that it really doesn't have, the Frost Spirits don't really tend to have high attacks, at least for the 1-drops. But we're going to see that Arcturus has an interesting effect. It has the effect that you can expend a Frost Spirit in order to give this Arcturus a +3 until the end phase. Alright, so this is essentially a 6 attack, or that's what you would think, but then you read the second part of his effect and he says that this Arcturus effect can be activated up to 2 times on your turn. So okay, so it can have 6 attack, or it can potentially have 9 attack. Now that seems like a very interesting option. I think that it's going to see play in some decks. I think that this is going to be a good answer towards many of the aggressive decks that like to stay in the 6-drops or in the 5 attack range. However, you do lose your attack buffs at the end phase, so this isn't gonna be the end all be all. If this effect could be used in your opponent's turn, it would probably be too broken, talking realistically here. But I think it will see play. I think it will see play. However, I don't think it's gonna be top of the cream seen in all Frost decks. I think it's gonna be like a solution to a problematic card. Like, if you know that you need to run over a Bull Tempest, you can just throw Arcturus, and then they're probably not, since they have Bull Tempest, not Bull Tempest, sorry, talking about Bull Tempest. If they have Sonic Core in play, Arcturus is going to be a good card to run over a Sonic Core, because they are not going to be able to chain counter runes because of Sonic Core's own effect. So Arcturus is able to ramp all the way to 9 attack and be able to swing over the Sonic Core. So I think it's going to be a card that will see play, but I don't think it will be like the most played card in Frost decks. So I'm going to give it a solid, I'll give it a solid C. I think that it will see play, but it's not going to be in most meta decks. I think it's just going to be as an option for a Frostbox deck. So, yeah. Okay, moving on to Shilolotl. Shilolotl actually is a card that was technically the first Frost Spirit, Frost Elestral that we learned about, because through the Kickstarter we had access to a promo Shilolotl, and I think this card will see some niche play. It has 2 attack, 3 defense, and when you cast this Shilolotl, oh my god, what is up with all of these tongue twisters? Shilolotl, Shilalolo. You can target up to 2 face down runes. As long as this Shilalolo is enchanted, those runes cannot be cast. Okay, so it's basically targeting 2 runes in that are set and making it so that they are not able to use them. And this can be a pretty strong effect. The only thing is it does have very low stats, so you're gonna need to protect your Citadel. But who knows? Maybe that's all you need. Maybe you just need it for 1 turn to swing for game. So I think it's worth including at least as a one-off in most Frost decks. I'm gonna give it a C. I think that there's a lot of cards that are in the C category, but it's because Frost got a lot of support, and I think that we could potentially see play, but it can also see nothing, no form of play. So I'm gonna go with the C because it's like the safe option. I'm gonna go with the safe option there. Okay, and Frostix. Okay, this card I've been waiting to be able to discuss it. And Frostix, for those that don't know, it's a crux for Frost Spirits. If Morfrost is the archetype that Frostfall is trying to push, and Frostix is basically the engine of Frost Spirit, of Frost decks in general, right? You're gonna see, I think Frostix is going to see a huge amount of play, and that's why I cannot wait to get my stained glass version promos of Frostix. Those look absolutely stunning. So what does it do? You can expend up to you can expend 2 Frost Spirits, so it's a little bit pricey, but if you do, you can discard this in Frostix in order to target and special cast a 1 spirit Frost Elestral from your underworld. So you can, in theory, for example, discard and Frostix by expending 2 and then special cast it itself. It is technically 3 spirits that you're using for this. However, it special casted itself, so that means that you can in theory ramp up into a 2 cost, just like that. Or you can choose something that is not in Frostix. You can choose, for example, one of the more Frost that we were talking about before, or you can choose one of the Earth Scouts, right? The Earth series that we were watching, and the Ursas are really gonna love using them Frostix, because in theory you can use that to create a wide board for the Ursas to be able to really pack pressure into your opponent. So I think that this card will see a lot of play, and I'm gonna give this an S tier. I think this card will see a huge amount of play in many meta decks, for in this set and in future sets for sure. Okay, and I believe this is the last Frost Elestral. I keep calling it spirits. I apologize for that. But, alright. Morolith is another holo. I think this is the last Frost holo, with the exception of the secret rares. And it has 6 attack and 4 defense. For a 2-drop, it's kind of low, right? That's lower than a Sonic Core. However, the effect might make up for it. So for those that don't know what Morolith says, it says that you can normal cast with 2 Frosts if an opponent has fewer Elestrals in their underworld than you do. So that means if you have more Elestrals in your underworld, which the Frost mechanic is all about sending cards to your underworld, and specifically Frost Elestrals. So if you have more, then you can just normal cast this with 2, and that's pretty insane, I gotta say. However, it's not all pitches and rainbows. We do have a restriction. When you cast this, you must send top 5 cards of your deck to your underworld. So you're gonna have to discard or mill yourself a little bit more, which could be very scary, because sometimes you mill cards that you really need. However, this also makes it so that it's easier for you to cast further Moroliths, right? Or more Moroliths later on in the game. If you're able to protect this Morlet and you're able to draw another Morlet and then cast it because you have more Frost Elestrals in the graveyard or just Elestrals in general, then suddenly this is going to pack a lot of pressure. Is it going to be costly? Yes. Is it going to possibly make you mill some of your most important cards? Definitely. But does it have potential? Sure. I would say it does have potential. I'm going to give this a B, just for the simple fact that it's a 2 cost that you can normal cast, and that this has the potential of ramping up to 3 costs. And that, if not for now, but in the future, that can be very, very important for the future of Elestrals. So I'm going to give it a B. I think it deserves the B. So what do you guys think about that? Are there any cards that caught your eye? Personally, for me, I really am excited for Taglo. I think that that card is going to help a lot the ramp decks, and that is personally my favorite type of deck in Elestrals. I love ascending into the big boss monsters. But how about you guys? I'll pass the question to you. Was there any card that got you excited? Please write it down in the comments. I'm gonna be reading all those comments, and I'm just excited to see how you guys are excited about this new set. And don't forget to please like the video if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe if you haven't already, because there's a lot of great content on the way and I would hate for you guys to miss out on it. So having said that, I think that that's all for today's video. Decentshirt signing out.